It's the Brandon Cruz Daily Fantasy Podcast, where I go and look at low plays and strategies specifically designed for GPPs. This is a show for people who are already informed in daily fantasy sports on this contest to operate. If you have a question leading NASCAR is a stupid question, feel free to shoot it my way on Twitter, BrandonCruzDFS. Most importantly, take everything you're hearing insult and use your best to make it entries. Additionally, if you have a gambling addiction, that's just not my problem. Check your sense of feelings at the door. We're talking about Road America for the Cup Series. Now, a bit of a summary of last year's race. You got to remember that this race went green, and we had a situation to where, certainly at the end, we had Stenhouse blowing a lot of tires throughout the race, having to pit nearly every caution and under green. He would end up staying out. We had a lot of teams very similar to what happened at Sonoma this year, to where it's the end of the race, or we're within the last 4, 5, 7 laps of the race, and a lot of guys that are not in contention, I'm talking about guys running 13th back, are like, well, the only way I'm going to improve my running position is to hope that there's a wreck and that I can gain positions on the leaders by pitting late in the race, and hopefully they'll pit and we'll move up. When we look at the drivers that did that at Sonoma, we are finding a lot of the Joe Gibbs Racing drivers. We are finding people along the lines of Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, Martin Truex Jr. All these drivers pitted in the last 10 laps hoping for something to happen or just, gain positions. We look at Martin Truex Jr. running 14th on lap 103, running 29th on lap 105. He ends up pitting there hoping for yellow. We have Denny Hamlin on lap 99 running 23rd, and he was falling through the field a bit to begin with here, but he was running 23rd, pits here as well. We see people like Todd Gilliland gain a lot of positions in the last 20 laps of this race because people pitted. We had people like Cole Custer, who started lap 88 31st and would end up finishing the race in 21st due to people pitting. Same thing with people like Joey Hand. He stayed out and he stayed out and passed people. We have people like AJ Allmendinger falling through the field late in the race. We have people like Joey Logano going from really running around 25th, 26th at the end of the race to finishing 17th because people pitted. And so when you're looking at the back half of the field and really the mid-pack of the field, we have different stories of what teams were trying to do, and really teams just not throwing in the towel, but, making a last swing effort to try and gain positions. Road America ended very similar to that way last year. You had a couple guys staying out, hoping that the race went green. Comes to my mind Eric Almirola. We have some guys who pit in the last caution, people like Christopher Bell, who start deep in the field and have to move up through the field. And then we have a lot of guys who were hoping for a wreck, a yellow, whatever the case was, and pitted. And so I think we can look at a lot of ways. I think we can look at how Road America played out last year and how Sonoma played out this year to have a really good idea of what's going to happen. Maybe not drivers-wise, but in terms of what we should look at in terms of our lap leaders, in terms of the guys who are going to be running in the top 10 all day. When we look at Sonoma, one last thing, look, NASCAR teams, ARCA teams, look, you don't have to pay me a lot, okay? Pay my expenses to get to the track. That's all I ask for. I'll pay for the pit pass. I'll pay for whatever I need to do to get my NASCAR credentials. But can you please hire me as a strategist to just tell you to not pit Kyle Larson at a track where you can't pass Cliff Daniels? I don't know why Kyle Larson didn't pit in the first stage of Sonoma, because he had the best car, the fastest car, and you can't pass in these cars. And Kyle Larson went from a situation where he should have absolutely ran away and murdered the field, had a car that nobody could compete, and then he got stuck in the pack, and coming out of the stage, started 22nd, was only able to drive up to 14th. In that run, okay, past 10 guys, but at that point, the entire field is separated from you. You have a gigantic gap between yourself and the leader. And so I would say let's try and pay attention to guys who are going to stay out for the stage win. A guy that comes to my mind and really coming off of the situation at Nashville is I'm worried about Denny Hamlin staying out to win a stage just to get those extra playoff points, but then being buried in the field for Road America. But that is a situation where I am very much concerned about guys staying out. When we look at guys who stayed out as well, we had at stage 2, The guys who stayed out, let me change that. The guys who pitted, let me go ahead and make sure I don't mess up the sorting thing real fast. Hold on. When we look at specific, and the reason I'm looking at Sonoma is because, look, Sonoma and Road America race very similar. It's a very tight track in terms of the racing line. The racing surface is not that big. It's more of a technical track, you know, because, look, these stock cars perform well on faster road courses. It's not as technical as the stupid Roval. It's not as untechnical as Watkins Glen, but this situation where you're going to have guys who, just like Sonoma, pull away from the field just because that's how the track is going to play out. When we look at guys who stayed out in this race at Sonoma in stage 1, I'm really concerned about them maybe doing the same thing again, and I want to focus on the guys who played the race correctly and pitted at the right before the end of stage 1, you know. And so let's go ahead and kind of go through these drivers here. And so Kyle Larson stays out to win the stage for some unknown reason, like the dumbest move in history. Logano stays out. Kyle Busch stays out. Those are really the front runners who stay out. Everybody else who finishes up front at the end of the stage: Justin Haley, Eric Almirola, Harrison Burton, Bilicki, Kurt Busch, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Cody Ware, Scott Heckert. These are who stayed out at the end of the first stage at Sonoma. When we look at the guys who actually played this race correctly, who were up front in this race, and the guy who really took over this race until he was passed later on, Chase Elliott, pitted before the end of the stage. Chris Buescher, who started up front, pitted at the end of the stage, or pitted before the end of the stage. I gotta stop saying something. Chase Elliott, Buescher, Reddick, Chastain, McDowell, Suarez. These are the guys who pitted before the end of the stage, and I think are somewhat in contention to maintain that and talk about it, or talk about them. Gosh, man, I really fell off a cliff. Guys who are going to be up front at Road America, who are going to have the same opportunity to pit before the end of the stage. When we talk about McDowell, when we talk about Cole Custer, when we talk about people like Chris Buescher, not looking at this subjectively or I forgot how. I'm an idiot. I'm going off the rails. When we look at this with no favoritism at all, no bias towards each of these guys, we can label these three drivers as guys who traditionally should not start up front at a road course. Don't come at me being like, well, McDowell has had a top 25. I'm trying to look at this as subjectively, or as not, you know what I mean. Trying to eliminate any bias here. So when we look at Cole Custer being up there, when we look at Buescher coming out of nowhere, starting inside the top 10 at Sonoma, running inside the top 10 at the end of the first stage, pitting before they actually get the green and white checkered flag, we can throw this at you and say, look, when we have guys who shouldn't be up front at Road America this weekend, they understand that, look, we are having a tremendous day based on track position. Let's pit before the end of the stage and not lose our track position. Let's not just start at the back of the field. And so a race that I really look at Sonoma, that tells me a lot about how the race went, is Cole Custer. The man starts 6th, running 10th. Right when people start to pit, he ends up pitting lap 21. Okay, he doesn't necessarily have the fastest car, but before the end of the second stage, he's running 13th, pits before the end of the stage, comes out, runs around 13th to 12th because he's maintained that track position. He gets into issues, I forgot exactly what happens if he pits at lap 87 or 89, but either way, looking at his race, and that's why I'm not focusing primarily on what Cole Custer did. I'm looking at how this car approached the race because he shouldn't have been up front. We see that they understand they need a track position. When we look at Michael McDowell, oh my God, he's a road course racer. Yeah, sure, he's helped a lot of kids learn how to drive on a road course in a go-kart. Okay, the team understands that we need to maintain this track position, and so he's running top 5, he pits, comes back out, runs 6th to 7th, right before the end of the second stage, pits again, and ends up running in the top 5 all day. When we look at Chris Buescher, a guy who shouldn't be up front in a road course, understands that, hey, we need to maintain this track position, let's keep pitting before the stage, and let's actually finish the day running second in the top 5. And so I wanted to start talking about Road America by looking at Sonoma and look at the guys who shouldn't have been there. When we look, it's really the same story. I need to resort this by finishing position real quick. But it's really the same story at COTA, but I wanted to use Sonoma for the example here because it's more fresh in people's mind than COTA at this point. Let me make sure that is sorted. All right, so when we go and we look at COTA, if I can find that, when we go and look at COTA, this is a very short race. Yet again, who was pitting before the end of the stages? Who was there paying attention, and really who was able to win this race because they were playing the game smart? They were. Oh my God! No, I didn't mean to do that. Who was? I normally don't like sorting these sheets, but at least lap by lap data sheets. But I think it's very important to look at that this weekend here. Who didn't pit and who did pit before the end of the stage? Because that's really what road courses are now. Everybody has stages that's ruined road courses. You pit before the end of the stage, and that's how you maintain your track position. If you stay out to get stage points, you're just throwing the race away. And so the people who stayed out at this point in the race, Blaney, he ends up staying out. And at this point, Blaney realizes that, look, we've stayed out. We're going to start deep in the pack. The only way to maintain our track position is to stay out for the second stage, and hopefully we can pass people, get lucky based on where yellows come out, and yada, yada, yada. But Blaney stays out. Logano, for the second race that we've seen, is going to stay out. And so when we look back at Sonoma and we look at Joseph Logano, Joseph Logano is a man who is going to stay out at these stages this year. And we can look back at previous years, and I've done that before, but I want to mainly focus on this year. Logano is going to stay out for the stages based on what they've done at Penske these two races. In stage one, Logano is going to stay out. I'm very much concerned about Logano for that reason. I would much rather be underweight on Logano because this is a strategic failure in this team. When we look at those are really the only two people. So right now, I'm very much worried about Penske staying out here. And maybe it's because they split it up to where Cindric was going to compete for the win and Logano was just not going to compete for the win, and so they keep him out to get stage points. Either way, Logano is a man that I'm very much concerned about entering this weekend staying out, and I'm concerned about the Penske guys doing that. And it also kind of backs your back half of the drivers into a corner. Like if you're running, 25th to dead last, there's really nothing you can gain from pitting before the end of the stage, and so you stay out and finish up front. Like when we look at COTA, Chris Buescher stays out, Eric Jones stays out. When we look at this, AJ Allmendinger stays out, Bubba Wallace stays out before the end of the first stage at COTA. And these were guys running, mid to back half of the field where that's really what they have to do. And because of that, your back half guys end up really just running in the back half all day. You can't gain those positions. You don't see, a major shift in where they're running because sure, they stay out, they get stage points, or they finish up front at the end of the stage. Once the pit cycle's back through under yellow, they're just back, if not worse, running where they were before. And so that's a concern there. When we look at Suarez was up front at the first stage at COTA, pitted before, ends up running into an issue, and that kind of buries them throughout the field. But that's really the second race that we've seen that, look, Trackhouse is going to be smart. Trackhouse is going to want to pit before the end of the stage, and this was an indication that we probably should have been more aggressive on Suarez, or at least I should have been more aggressive on what I saw from Suarez. Another thing that we need to focus on for Road America is that we're not passing. We're not seeing any passing positions. I am very happy that Nashville was a very, very fun race to watch in this car, and it's very interesting that this next gen car makes tracks that were like non-existent in the Gen 6 or even the old cars actually run well, but tracks that it ran well at before are kind of being suffered by the dirty air. Either way, road courses and short tracks, we're seeing that you cannot pass. It is not possible to pass. It's not possible to gain positions. Even if you have the fastest car, if you're stuck in traffic, if you're stuck in the pack, you're not passing. And so for Road America, I want to play guys that are going to run top 15 all day. Now, duh, Brandon, of course you always want to do that. But the reason I started with Sonoma talking about Busher, Cole Custer, Michael McDowell, guys that shouldn't be up there. When we get guys that start up there this weekend who shouldn't be up there, say if we get I'm trying to think of some off guy, like say if we have Stenhouse start up there, or if we have somebody like Austin Dillon start up front, or Cole Custer again, whatever the case is, I'm leaning towards trusting that car maintaining that track position all day at Road America. I think track position is going to be huge at Road America, and I think this race goes green. And so, if you're chasing place differential, I'm very much concerned about that. I would be very worried about that. Now, granted, when we look at the place differential that didn't come through at Sonoma, we look at Joe Gibbs Racing, and that was an anomaly, and they said it themselves that, look, that's the worst we've been as a team in a very long time. We did not show up with the right setup. We did not show up for that race. We were not prepared for what this next gen car would do at Sonoma compared to what it did at COTA. They made a mistake there. I don't think we see a repeat of Joe Gibbs missing that greatly at Sonoma. However, if we do see a guy that seems like a good place differential play outside of being back there due to wrecking in practice or doing something stupid, I am worried about that shock not coming through. That usual guaranteed place differential might not be coming through, and so that's a situation where I would want to be underweight on, or if anything, those are the plays that I kind of want to be underweight on this weekend. When I'm looking at guys that I want to target, it's the guys starting inside the top 15. Outside of the fact that, or not outside of the fact, but using that as the baseline, or using that as how I want to build my lines. Like, I need to enter this week not concerned about, what if so-and-so gets knocked out of the top 10? What if so-and-so gets moved out and, finishes with -7 place differential points or whatever? I think worrying about that is not going to end up leading towards how this race should play out, or how the optimal line can play out, or how a good scoring line can play out. Like I said, when we look at Road America last year, we had a situation where it went green at the end, and we had a lot of teams very similar to Sonoma. I mean, it's insane how much of a spitting image this Sonoma race a couple weeks ago is to Road America last year. And so I don't want to play guys that are going to be stuck mid pack, because I don't think they could really do much outside of people pitting late in the race, hoping for a yellow to come through. Speaking of pitting before the end of the race, if I have a guy that's going to be, running 10th, 11th all day, and they're not like a top 7 contender, I'm worried about them pitting late in the race, trying to hope for a yellow. And so really, just focusing on guys starting top 5, really. That's where I want to go. That's really the part that I'm wanting to focus on. When we start talking about drivers, and some people don't like that I don't specifically talk about drivers, but I like to at least explain where I'm coming from and where my mentality is. When we look at drivers this weekend, Larson, Elliott are going to be up there. We saw that Hendrick was extremely fast here last year. Trackhouse is going to be there. I don't really understand why Daniel Suarez is so cheap. We've seen it time again that not only did he win, he won Sonoma, but why is this taking so long to load over here? But yeah, I don't understand why Suarez is $7,700 when we've seen that Trackhouse is going to have a good car at this track. They're going to play the right strategic game. They're not going to do anything stupid. They understand what they want to do to win this race. I think Suarez is just a terrible misprice here. And I understand when you look back at some of his races last year, he did have mechanical issues, but the 2 races this year, first stage, they're playing that correctly, and really the first stage is going to dictate how your lineup goes. Like, that's really the focal point there. I told you that I'm not concerned too much about Joe Gibbs Racing running issues. What is he barking at? Give me a moment. Anyway, sorry. I promise I didn't beat my dog. Don't worry. I know he's quiet right now, but he's doing better. We just had a package at the door. He's a good alert dog. Anyway, Hendrick is going to be there. I'm not concerned. Now, if we do see that, Joe Gibbs is just off again. I would lean towards they're just struggling with these types of road courses. But I think Trackhouse, I think Hendrick is going to be your priority. I'm worried about Penske not having the speed to be there and really dictate the race. I'm even more concerned about them staying outside of Cindric for the end of the stages. So that's what those would be the first parts that I'm worried about. And by that point, we're knee deep at AJ Allmendinger. He's going to race for the win. They're not worried about stage points. So we don't have to have that against AJ. I'm not just going out of my way to chase Reddick, to chase Briscoe. I want to see what they're bringing up to the table. Like, Briscoe's a great example. Like, if Briscoe starts in the top 6, I would feel okay with him maintaining that track position all day based on how they're going to spread out and everything throughout this race. Suarez and Jones seem to be great plays in the 7K range. Eric Almirola is should be on that to where, look, if he starts in top 12, somewhere around there, I would much rather play Eric Almirola starting top 12 than Stenhouse maybe starting like 27th, although it might, on paper, look like Stenhouse might be the better play. I think this situation where, like I said, track position really comes through. McDowell, if you start up front, I trust you here. I'm not too concerned about it. And this is, Thursday, and we haven't seen practice yet. They practice Saturday, but this is just my early look and early opinion on this in general. If Wallace starts up front, I'm fine with that. Same thing there. Like, once we get through here, there's not really any guys that I hate in the 6K range, hate in the 5K range. I don't see myself playing Loris or Kyle or Balicki. I don't think we necessarily need to get that low. But it's more of a situational race. That's why road courses are it's not that you wait for the starting line to come out for your place differential plays, but you wait for it to come out to understand who's viable up front, and who's viable in the top 12s. And so really that's kind of my early rundown for Road America and everything. I'm going to go ahead and end it there. I think that's an early look and a good way to, a good mind space to be in entering this weekend's practice and qualifying session. So thank you guys for listening, and I will see you later in the Xfinity Series preview show. So I'll see you then.